This is Jim Semivan, and you are listening to That UFO Podcast.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to That UFO Podcast. This is your listener call-in for December, or at least part one of it. My name is Andy, and thanks to everyone who's been in touch. If you still want to get involved, I'm doing a few more call-in days over the next week, maybe just after Christmas, around that time as well. I'm trying to take a bit of a break, but, trying to get some other stuff done as we speak. So a few folks are recording with me in a few days' time. However, I've got the first couple of calls in the bag and also a few emails from folks as well. So what I'm going to do is start off reading out the email and give you some thoughts, and then we'll move on to the listener call-in section of the podcast. Remember, if you want to get involved, email over UFOUAPAM@gmail.com. And remember, folks, quick plug, if you look at the description of the podcast, there is a link to get a free month of the podcast over on Patreon, and it gives you the $3 tier access, I believe, as well, just as a little kind of December, January treat, and maybe you'll want to keep that on and support into 2025. Anyway, listen, first up, I had Dave get in touch, so thank you, Dave, for reaching out. He said, "Hey Andy, it took me a while to get to this documentary. This was The Cosmic Con by Darcy Weir." And he says, "Corey Good is such a douchebag." His word, folks, not liable, can't sue me. This is more a question from me to you. I saw Emory Smith was part of the original gang for a while, and now he is the host of Cosmic Disclosure, that's over on Gaia. Do you think he is legit or what? I sure would like to think he is at least doing the best he can, and he strikes me as being straight with his government work history, though it sounds wild to say the least. Have you heard any different? So, listen, I'm not too familiar with Emory Smith. I know the name. I'm going on the Gaia channel right now, Dave, and listeners, and I'm going to read out Emory's bio. In 1990, Emory Smith entered active duty with the US Air Force, stationed in Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. This opened the doors for training as a surgical technologist and surgical first assist, working under numerous specialized surgeons around the world. Due to varying surgical experience and intense knowledge of biologics, there's that word, and genetics he gathered during this time, he was offered a moonlighting job at both Sandia National Laboratory facilities and Los Alamos National Laboratory to work on tissue samples of various origins. Emory's experience working for the military compartmentalized contract corporations, their hospitals and their labs became the foundation of knowledge and experience to form his own medical and biotechnology companies. He now comes forward to openly talk about his experiences working at these facilities for the first time in 25 years. Now, I am then looking on the Gaia page. Do you know what, folks? So many of you support. I'm probably going to have to sign up and pay for a membership to watch some of this stuff. I will guarantee you right now that I am not going to fall down a rabbit hole of believing that most, if not all of this isn't true or embellished, just given the whole, if you watch Cosmic Con by Darcy Weir, I'm literally this weekend going to drop that on the paid feeds. It's not going out on the free feeds, folks. It's members only content. It's more of a speculative back and forward discussion between myself and Dan joining me for it to look at Gaia, the history of Gaia, Corey Good, that whole story, David Wilcock, and what people think about that. We share our thoughts on Gaia there. I've never really had a big experience with the channel, but I might sign up and just kind of have a little look for my own knowledge and morbid curiosity, to be honest, over some of it anyway. But yeah, I can't comment too much, but again, it just sounds like one of those guys who Gaia have found, who have come forward, and I suppose I've got a very tainted view now of that channel, given what Darcy Weir talks about. Cosmic Con is available, folks, on Amazon Prime and various other streaming services, completely free, so worth going to check that out if you can. And if you're on those paid feeds and get the members only content, let me know what you think of our review of the documentary and its contents as well. Dave also says, you asked us listeners that what were our favourite things that happened in the UFO subject for this year. And yes, folks, please send me over some things like your highlights, lowlights, and general thoughts and musings for 2024, but also what your hopes are or what you expect to see in 2025 for some recordings that are coming up. Dave says, for me, it's been a big year. I think in no particular order. The US Congress has got the message and is continuing to seek answers. So on that one first, yeah, But very quickly after, I don't know how serious some of them took that, and within hours, their staffers had T-shirts and whatnot on sale. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but is that the route they're really taking it serious? I don't know. It took them a very long time between hearings to acknowledge that they still hadn't had Grush in a skiff. So I don't know. We'll need to see. Time will tell, of course. Dave said the US and worldwide disinformation and UFO cover-up is falling apart. I think there's definitely been more cracks appear this year than there were previously, so that's a good thing. Dave says the mass UAP slash cough cough drone incursions worldwide, amazing. I share my thoughts on that with one of the listeners, another Dave who called in. So I'll leave that for that section. It's still definitely strange and weird what's going on. I am not so sure it's NHI though. But yeah, very odd. And also finding your podcast, he says. So thanks, Dave. I appreciate that. He says, cheers, Andy. Happy holidays. Enjoy your vacation. Thanks, Dave. Very much appreciated, mate. Plenty of content still going out over the holiday period into January, including stuff like this and a few other shows. But yeah, really interesting email. Send over any of your thoughts, folks, on that, especially that last part. But I will dig into some of the Gaia content in the new year. Maybe members only, because I don't want to be doing shows constantly on the free feeds of my thoughts with varying guests on some of the Gaia content. But maybe for my own knowledge, it's worth digging into some of that. If there's anything on Gaia that you listening to this enjoy or recommend, send me over the link and I'll happily watch it. I'll sign up and pay for it, folks. You support me enough that I should dig into these things. There's a few documentaries I'm going to be watching that aren't ones I would necessarily go out my way to watch, but people have asked me to review or share my thoughts on, so I'll be doing that as well. But anyway, in the meantime, folks, let's crack on with this listener call-in for December 2024, and we'll start off with a long call, but a very good one from another Dave. Joining me on the call-in for what may be the third occasion, I believe. Is that right, Dave?
3 times.
3 times, yep. Hat-trick hero for those of you who follow soccer/football. I've got Dave in New York. Dave, welcome.
Hey, what's up, Andy? Thanks for having me.
Very good to have you back. Listen, the floor once again is yours. What are we talking about today?
Thanks, Andy. So something that I don't know, like I've been thinking about this a lot, and I have a feeling others have as well. But something that I wanted to ask you about a little bit, just to pick your brain, is around videos and photographic UAP evidence, and how difficult or almost impossible it is to kind of validate those things, given where we are now with availability of just tools, and AI generated content.
Yeah.
There's entire social channels out there, YouTube, the old former Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, Blue Sky, etc., that are all about sharing these videos and these photos. And I kind of feel like I'm of two minds, when it comes to that, because I love seeing that stuff, like it's partially what brought me into this space in general, right? Like, heard stories, I would see some videos, and it would just get me so excited. But on the other hand, we do live in this world where it's so easy now, especially now, to just fake all that stuff. And I just find myself struggling sometimes with seeing that stuff popping up in my feeds, and kind of being excited and interested in it. And then all of a sudden, getting hit with like the reality check, like, well, Dave, like, where'd that video come from? Who produced it? Like, were there other witnesses? I started asking the questions that just inevitably lead to nowhere, because there are no answers, right? It's just somebody throwing this video out there. I don't know. It's just it's a struggle for me sometimes. I don't know. I don't know if you feel that or.
Yes. So I could go on about this in a million different directions. I've tried to make some notes as you were talking, things coming to me, because it's a very, very good point and discussion point. One with there's no like concrete answer. It's not black and white, this question. So last week, I have a few folks that at my little boys' football practice who are into the UFO topic and now know I have this podcast, right? I don't walk about with T-shirts on advertising it, folks, funnily enough, okay? People tend to find out through word of mouth that I do this. And a lot of folks have been asking me about the drone stuff that's happening just now. I would imagine most listeners would be shocked at how little of the drone video footage I have looked at online or care to look at online, because I'm really sorry. A lot of what people are sharing are aircraft
Planes, yeah.
and out of focus stars. Now, I was shown a video by someone next to me that they were just scrolling through whatever they'd seen online. I think it was on Instagram. And they went, "Oh, some of these videos are amazing. Look at this." And I think they said plasmoid or plasma. And I was like, "All right, okay, yeah." And they're like, "Can I show you?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah." And bear in mind, can I just qualify this by saying I would love every video and picture to be a genuine non-human entity, craft, being, whatever. Obviously, right? However, they showed me this video and I was like, right, okay, black background, little point of light, looks kind of freaky, and when it's zoomed in on. I got my iPhone out. I've got an iPhone 16, the latest one, right? Not flexing there. I get the iPhone every year when it comes out because of the phone contract I've got, folks, right? I put it up to the sky at the biggest star I could see. It may have been a planet, but it was the biggest, brightest star in the sky. And I zoomed in to times 25. And I said to them, okay, so that plasmoid you're looking at, does it look any different to what I've just done zooming in on that planet/star? And they were like, no, it looks exactly the same. I'm like, right, so this is my issue at the minute. That might be a genuine video of a non-human entity, orb, plasma, whatever you're showing me, right? My problem is there's no context, there's no metadata, all that kind of stuff. And I've just showed you the exact same thing, and we know that's a star or planet just to look at it in the night sky. That's what I'm seeing a lot of, with a lot of people providing. And I think where some folks have gone wrong, and that we'll keep, because it's the wider point you've made here around some people have seen the phrase mass hysteria being used. I don't think mass hysteria is correct. There is a lot of mass misidentification. There are more people than ever right now, I think, looking up at the sky and pointing their cameras at the sky and looking at lights in the sky than normally do. And how long, Dave? You've listened now for a few years. I've said so many times, and other folks have, and listeners and other podcast hosts and journalists, that there are so many things going on up in the sky, but most folk don't look up because they're too busy looking down at their phones. Well, at the minute, everyone on the east coast of the US is really interested in looking up at the sky. So does it not make sense? And what have we said before? Like, if 97% of sightings of UFOs are normally prosaic, then 3% are really interesting, and that's what we care about. Does that not just still stand that 97% of what people are seeing in the sky is prosaic and 3% are interesting? Now, I suppose that the X factor in the equation is the drones that people are actually seeing in the sky. That what's going on with that is a totally separate thing. I've not yet seen any evidence of these drones chasing orbs that I can say looks genuine yet. I saw a video my wife shared with me that I believe was shared by some big platform that she'd showed me. Whether she goes on TikTok, right? I don't. Very quickly in the comments though, they're saying it's like an orb. It looks. I think it was a daytime video. I'll try and pull it up, Dave. But very quickly in the comments, several people have gone on Flight Radar and said there was a high altitude balloon at that exact location at the time you're saying you've seen this glowing orb in the sky that would have been reflecting the sun. So it's probably that. And then underneath that, there is a small mix of that's probably correct, and a bigger mix of that's nonsense, this is aliens, NHI, this is what's going on. So a lot of folks are doing 2 + 2 = 4, but does it? So that at the moment is a big thing for me, and I suppose I'm just trying to get back to where I am with this whole drone UAP situation. It's great everyone's looking up. It's great we've got all these videos, like you say, online. There's a lot of chaff to go through to try and get any wheat at the minute. And I think it's actually gone to the point where any of the good stuff, that wheat, is being missed because there are so many videos of planes turning in the sky or
Right.
drones. And again, we can talk about what those drones may or may not be doing separately to really drill down to there being good videos. On that then, that's my kind of rant. There was a video I saw recently that I thought was really good. And very quickly again, people pointed out it wasn't a real UFO video. However, it was, I believe it was of a video game or a flight simulator, and it was of a pilot out over the ocean, and they were filming what appeared to be, I'm sure it was like a saucer type craft, but it looked so real. Just the situation, the timing, the lack of the sensationalism with it. And then someone pointed out, actually, it's from a game, but it's like hyper realistic, like the cockpit and all that kind of stuff. And then you look and go, actually, that maybe does look a bit too perfect and everything else. To your point, Dave, I'll bring you back in. What would perfect or real look like? Because either it looks so good that it's fake, it's AI, it's CGI, it's whatever,
Yeah.
or it's so crap that it's just a light in the sky and it's Andy saying it's a star.
Right. I don't know. I really think that's the challenge. Outside of FLIR footage that gets pulled from an F-23 or something. You know what I mean? Like, to add legitimacy or something like that to that kind of media, I feel like it has to come from the military or like some local law enforcement or something. You know what I mean? Like, and even then, like, I don't know.
And that's a shame, isn't it? Because if someone shows me a video and it was something I thought looked really incredible, my instinct would be to trust them. But
sure,
if Joe Q Public at my son's football training says, I filmed this last night and it looks really cool, and they send me it, are people going to believe a UFO podcast host putting that video online and saying, look what I filmed? Because isn't that coincidental? It's very difficult. So then that goes down to anyone who, whether you have a position of influence or celebrity, people have millions of followers and they share. Dane Cook has just shared a video online, the comedian and actor, that I saw has gotten a lot of traction in the last day or two. And that's getting a kind of mixed response. Looks like he's filmed one of these weird drones that are odd and in the sky. Other folks going, it's poor quality, shaky camera, all that kind of stuff. Do you need it to come from the government or the military, or have one of these drops with loads of metadata behind it for folks to pore over? It's really difficult. So it's almost at the point, is there any video evidence that could come from outside of our government that people would believe? But then why would you believe the government releasing any UFO videos right now?
Yeah, that's also a really good question.
Can I ask you a question, Dave?
Sure.
Right, so let's talk about the drone stuff.
Sure.
What's your opinion on what's going on with it?
I think that kind of to your earlier point, there's a lot of people who are pointing their cameras now up in the air and they're looking. So you've got this influx of witnesses, this influx of videos. And I think that, there's probably a large percentage of what people are filming that can be explained as planes or as drones, because people are people and they start hearing about drones and suddenly, the hobbyist that's like, oh, well, hell, I'm going to throw mine in the air and see if I can capture, something of what's going on, or maybe just to be a prankster. So I think there's a percentage of that as well. My thoughts on the drone stuff, it's a little bit different because I start to go in that direction of not just like what are they, but I'm a little afraid. This whole situation is made me fearful as just an American citizen, um, because this has been going on for weeks and weeks,
Yep.
and where's the response from, from the military or from our government? I mean, local officials have been up in arms about this for weeks, and only recently, I think, we started getting official statements from the Pentagon about what they think is going on or what they're going to do about it and how they're following up. And now, finally, again, like almost weeks or a month later, they're finally the FAA has put in no-fly restrictions right around certain portions of New Jersey and the East Coast. And it's like, well, where was that? Where was all this? Like, again, like now the government is like put into place some kind of anti-drone technology. If they find something that again is breaking these zones that they're not supposed to fly in, they can take them down. And I'm just like, okay, that's great. But again, this has been going on for a really long time, and all this has been playing out on the news everywhere, all day, every day, and especially social media. And I just worry, like, okay, well, now all of our adversaries, those who wish us harm, are just like, great, we can just fly some drones over there, and they ain't going to do anything about them. You know what I mean? Like, they can carry things over there, we can do surveillance, and people are going to get freaked out, but we'll have free reign to fly over these areas and capture footage or do whatever kind of surveillance we want to do for weeks at a time. Get what we need, get out. That's really scary. So it goes beyond the idea that maybe there's some UAP NHI aspect to all of this, and maybe there is, but it just concerns me as just a general citizen here, not knowing what's going on up there, and the government just seemingly not having any plan in place to deal with this stuff. And it again also scares me that it's taken this kind of an incident for them to start thinking about that.
Do you think they know what it is? And when I say they, I'm not talking the whole government. I'm talking about the aspect of the government which really matters that would be dealing with this
Yeah,
ASAP.
I don't know, Andy. I mean, honestly, they should, given all of the satellites that are in orbit, the just the surveillance that they have just in general. Like, you can't tell me they haven't been able to point some cameras or get their own drones up in the air to
Yep.
follow these things and find out where they're coming from, even, right? Like,
Yes.
I just have a hard time understanding how that's not something that would have immediately set some alarms to trigger not just FBI, but DOD, whoever, to again, like, figure out where this stuff is coming from and what their intent is. But I could also be completely naive about the effectiveness, right, of our government, like in that sense. Maybe we really aren't prepared. And
As an American citizen, then let me run a few things past you that I've seen people say this could be, and just give me a couple of words on what you think. And if you don't know, you don't know, but speculate. The chance that the main thing people are seeing here is non-human technology.
There's a chance. There's definitely a chance, and I say that because there are definitely some things that people have reported about these drones or these things in the air that kind of speak to the observables that Lou's talked about in the past, right? Some of the 5 observables. So there's definitely a chance.
The chance that this is US tech looking for nuclear material, dirty bombs, that story.
My gut is that that's not the case.
Okay. The chance that this is an element of the deep state trying to put on a show of authority or lack of oversight before Trump comes in.
Right. I've heard that conspiracy before. I don't necessarily buy it. Yeah.
The chance this is foreign adversarial tech over US soil and it's just not being shot down.
High probability, in my opinion, again.
Is that the highest of all of them for you, or?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. It just feels like, since none of us in the US at least have been able to identify with any absolute certainty that it is our own technology, and we can't explain like how these things are here, where they're coming from. It feels to me that it's likely that it's some kind of foreign adversary utilizing some new technology, new drone technology, to surveil, and test the waters and see how it goes. And if you ask me, the test has been proven pretty successful.
Do you know one of my issues with the NHI aspect of this? And I think I'm talking about the broader story, because to say that none of the videos taken aren't NHI, well, of thousands now being taken, quite possibly. Whenever a UFO event has happened, and generally it happens at night, okay, we know that. And I think your Hollywood mainstream media would even joke about that sometimes. It's always nighttime, okay? But you could think that, well, there's a 50-50 chance that any event would happen at night. And given the nature of a lot of the events are more clandestine or, quiet, and they don't want to be overly seen, then it would be nighttime. This is an event now that's gone on for weeks, like you say, and is so widespread. Why, if it's NHI, are they only coming out at night and still having their lights on and trying to look like? Then you go into the whole morphing into
Right.
into human looking craft, which is a weird thing. But not that I'm not totally against that being real. It just seems, I think I'm totally in the idea of that they do now know in the US what this is, or at least enough people do within the government and private contractors and whatnot, because they will have tracked this stuff back to its origin.
That's what I would have imagined as well. Although I just heard a sheriff, he gave an interview on, what podcast? I can't remember which UFO podcast, but he talked quite a bit about these drones, but his experience with it made it sound like it didn't seem like it was like a human, like a human created this thing, the way that it moved and how close, what he saw. It just seems odd, strange beyond just, oh, that could be explained as a drone. So again, like there's still some aspect of it that I still struggle with suggesting that it's completely NHI, or that it can be explained as NHI. Because there are things that it does that makes it just seem like, well, that could just be, just a bigger drone that somebody's built. So I think there's more part of me now that given how long this has gone on for, and so many stories of what people are seeing and the videos that they've shot of these things, that makes it just seem like it's some kind of human-based technology.
So one other thing I forgot to mention within my list of what could it be for you is the idea we've always heard about, there being like a Project Bluebeam, where we're going to get this false flag alien invasion happen one day. And it's very conspiratorial. It's very out there for a lot of folks. However, is there an argument that if you brought a Project Bluebeam, taking away the whole holographic technology and whatever it might look like, an alien invasion, quote unquote, this is a pretty realistic version of that if you wanted to enforce new laws and get a populace scared and then under your control in a different way, is this a good way to go about it, where you stick things in the sky that you claim you don't know what they are, you bring in new anti-drone laws, anti-drone technologies, and it's not quite an alien invasion, but it's alien in the sense that, well, they don't know what it is. We don't have to tell them what this is. and this is your kind of Project Bluebeam 2.0?
Could be. I personally have a hard time understanding like people or organizations that are willing to go to those kinds of great lengths, but I can't put a lot of the those kinds of nefarious things past human beings. Like we've done some pretty awful things, and we do a lot. We've done a lot, and there's proof of it. To back some of those kinds of conspiracies, but I don't know. For me, like what it's underscored is how unprepared we are to deal with an event like this.
Yeah.
If it's NHI or again, if it's human tech, regardless, like we just we're not ready. And so maybe the silver lining of all of this is that this event is helping to put more eyeballs on this sort of gray area of like, well, this is the age that we live in now, where this technology is out there. But if we are visited by NHI, like if these intelligences decide one day to reveal themselves, will we be ready to identify that as, oh yeah, like we've got the proper technology in place that's looking for this stuff now. And we can tell the difference between foreign adversaries, our own drones, right, versus something that, is otherworldly. Maybe that's a good thing.
Just before we wrap up, I never asked you, Dave, what's your favorite piece of UFO footage? Since you asked me about, fake AI, CGI, but what's the one you look at all the time and go, what if?
There's so many, Andy. There is one that I have like seen many times, and every time I see it, I'm just like, oh man, I wish I hope that's real. It was taken, and I don't know if you've seen it as well, but it was, I think it was taken in China, near an airport, and it's some kind of an object hovering above the ocean, and it's like this thin. It just doesn't look like your typical UFO shape, because it just looks like a paper thin thing, just like in the air.
Is it the rod and it shoots the light?
Well, yeah. And it shoots this laser that it looks like it's scanning, right? It looks like it's like taking a scan of something. And the laser is emitted from this one spot on this rod. And it just blows me away, like, because it looks so authentic. And I think it was shot from multiple angles. I think there's more than one video in different angles. So that's one. There is one more, and I think it was a sphere that was hovering over like Tel Aviv. And again, I think it was shot from a few different angles, and it's floating maybe a few hundred feet off the ground in this sort of well-lit part of Tel Aviv, and it's kind of hovering, and then it flashes, and as soon as it's done flashing, it shoots up.
I know the one, yeah.
Yeah, I really like that one too. So those are two favorites.
Cool. I'd probably still go with stuff that's out there. The Turkish VHS of the craft where the guy filmed this stuff from the beach over months, and when he zooms in on the light, you see what looks like the figures.
Yeah, the two figures. Yeah.
I know folks have said, and listen, based on the two you mentioned, I know folks have said they have been debunked and whatnot.
Yeah.
The Tel Aviv one, I know it's filmed from multiple angles. I would look at that and say that looks like an art project. It does look good though. The Chinese one's pretty cool. I would love that to be genuine. And coming from China, there's always a mystique around anything that manages to get out of China. This podcast probably on our list now that we have just mentioned China so many times. The Turkish one though, it's filmed with VHS, which is always great. It was done over so long. I know folks have said it's like cruise liners out at sea, and it's just because they're against the ocean, it's dark and everything. I can't see that at all. And people say it's very hard to fake the VHS stuff the way they have. So that would be the one for me. And also, I'll finish off with, what were your highlights, lowlights of 2024 from a UFO point of view? And then any hopes for next year?
Highlight for me, I think, was the second sort of congressional hearing that was held. And I know a lot of people have complained about that one because they felt like, we didn't really learn anything new. We were expecting to see whistleblowers and we didn't really see them. Yes, there was a part of me that was a little bit disappointed in that as well, but I'm hopeful because I'm hoping that this is really going to continue to be more of something that we revisit. The Congress continues to bring people in to talk, and that media continues to cover it, as seriously as they had. I think anything that continues to bring this discussion into the everyday lives of people who aren't, into ufology is a good thing. So that to me was a highlight. The low light, I think we've talked to death about it. It's the drones. I'm not going to lie. It started out as kind of a highlight because I was excited by the fact that, well, maybe this is NHI, again, maybe being in some position where they're just like, hey, we don't really care if you see us now. We're just going to be out and about doing our thing. But then quickly turned into something else where, again, it's just more of this nightmare scenario of this event just kind of shedding light on the fact that we're not ready. We're not prepared to deal with these kinds of incursions. And that freaks me out. As far as 2025 is concerned, I don't know, man. Just more disclosure. I want more discussions out in the open. I'd really love to hear from a witness that isn't Lou Elizondo or David Grush. Somebody who's, a complete unknown, willing to come out and talk and share more details about what they know, what they've seen. That would be great. I would love to also see more evidence or hear more evidence. There's always talk about some disclosure around, the private companies that, that are, that have something or have some things. It's like, okay, well, who are they? Can we name names? And I mean, we've heard Lockheed Martin thrown around, which is all well and good, but I want somebody to, somebody who I don't know to come out and say it and kind of point to some areas, some locations, like, yes, we definitely have, like, they have materials that they've continued to back engineer, or they've got materials that they've taken from Roswell, wherever, just where is it? What are they, who are they and where are they? I want to hear more of that. I'd love to see if that happens in 2025. I don't really think that it happened this year. So we'll see what happens.
Well, one thing I would love to happen would be to get you back on again, Dave, for the next call in. Always good to speak to you. That's why you get a bit extra time as well. So I think once you've had 3 calls, you get to be on as long as you want. So you start to get to you get your own show after 10 calls. It's like I stamp the card every time you get a coffee. The 10th one's your own show. So well done. No, thanks, mate. It was really good having you on, and all the best for your holidays and New Year as well.
Same to you, Andy, and same to everybody out there. Peace, and let's talk again soon.
Joining me on the line now, all the way from Utrecht in the Netherlands, I've got Hans. Hans, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
It's good to have a listener on from the Netherlands or Holland, as some folks may be more familiar. I don't think I've had a listener on from the Netherlands yet, and if I have, I apologise. It's been a few years now. But anyway, listen, I've not had many, so welcome, and the floor is yours. What do you want to talk about, Hans?
Yeah, thanks a lot. I love your show. Like I said in the pre-chat, your balance between skepticism and openness is something I also really enjoy. So thank you for that.
No, thanks.
Yeah, and so already for a while, I've been wanting to share this idea that I had. It's a little bit crazy, maybe, but I don't know. It's a crazy topic, right?
It is, yeah.
Right. So my thought was, I think we've only mapped something like 5% of the ocean floor, right? Something like
Mhm.
that number, super low. We know more about the moon surface, I think, than about the ocean floor.
Mm.
We've heard countless reports of these, whatever these beings might be that people interact with, of being able to somehow telepathically communicate or influence behavior, freeze bodies. There's a lot of people. That's the last kind of point in my kind of thing. A lot of people are actually afraid of the ocean. Many people, even my partner, is afraid of the ocean. So my thought was, just as a thought experiment, what if these beings, if they are like, USOs being under the water, being mostly seen under the water more and more, what if they are creating this fear in us to stay out of there? So that's kind of my goofy theory, and I'm just curious if anybody has an opinion on that. But I find it interesting. What do you think?
Cool. So the idea that a species is deliberately implanting that fear of the ocean to stop us going there, that makes me think a little bit of have you ever seen The Truman Show, the Jim Carrey movie?
Yep.
Slightly different. It doesn't involve aliens, obviously, and spoilers for a film that's over 25 years old now, folks, but go and watch it. But he has a fear of the ocean instilled in him because they don't want him to travel across the water to find out what's on the other side. And it's actually he's in a studio, isn't he? Like the biggest TV studio in the world. Let me ask you before I share my thoughts on it. If I'm a passerby in the street and I see Hans sitting at the table with the coffee mug saying aliens exist, change my mind, and I ask you, what do you think's going on? What would you say the answer is first?
That's a really I think my answer would be that's a very difficult question to answer. There seems to be something going on, and depending on the glasses we have on, like the mental landscape we live in, it seems to be appearing differently. Like 500 years ago, people were seeing aliens and demons, whatever. Now we are very much technologized, and we see UFOs and craft. So I'm quite convinced that something is happening with our perception, but there is something there. And for people, you have to kind of gauge who you're talking to. I was listening today to a podcast. You must know it. It's called Engaging the Phenomenon. And I think
Yep.
what's the Harvard or Stanford biochemist guy?
So it's Gary Nolan's just
Yes.
been on with James Iandoli, who
Yeah.
hosts the podcast. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think he made a similar point of, you can probably at least talk about the nuts and bolts part of this. But yeah, your question is what do I think it is?
Yeah. So like obviously aliens exist. That's by the by. Everyone listening to this, I imagine, at least thinks, yeah, we've got aliens or something non-human. But is it one species? Is it multiple species? And how would you dive into that a little bit more?
I guess what I like then is to have the approach of, nobody knows, but there seems to be some consistency in reporting, as far as I understand it, for there being several kinds of beings, like the mantids and the little grays. So there seems to be different kind of presentations to us. What that ultimately means, I don't know, honestly.
So why I'm asking that is I love the idea that a species has instilled this fear in humanity of the ocean, and the ocean for me seems a scarier place than space to go to because you can see so little under the water. You can't see in front of you, and it's not as if you've got like a field of view. You have to rely on instruments and all that kind of stuff. Even if you have windows on a submarine, they're almost pointless, aren't they, unless something's right next to you.
Yeah.
How would you compute the idea then that is there more than one species, and do they all not want us going in the ocean, or do you think it's one species that's already here and doesn't want us going in the ocean. Have you ever thought of it that far down the line?
I actually haven't, because
Well,
the thing is,
now you have.
yeah, I have now. I would guess that there's probably only one species, and I guess part of the answer might be that yes, like there are aliens, maybe there are also interdimensional. It might be everything altogether. But if this theory is true that there are beings living under the surface of the ocean, I think it makes more sense to be one species for some reason. I guess because of the odds or something like that. Yeah.
Unless that's, I mean, you could look at it, and this is just wild off the cuff speculation, but this is what this is good for. Like, if you've got a species which has control of that domain, and they are the ones that have these mobile labs, quote unquote, under the water we hear about, and that's where the tic tacs maybe come and go from, whatever they may be. Another species has the kind of air domain, another species is on land. Maybe that, because for me, it makes sense there are multiple species all at play. So I can buy that. I don't know if you would have that idea of a fear of the ocean, but certainly the idea of having that expanse that, you know, most of the earth is covered in water. And even then, it was only a couple of years ago I kind of realized, and not that I came up with this idea, but I had just never thought of before, that if you think of the earth as an apple, we literally live on the skin of the apple, not the inside. We don't, you know, we know what it looks like a little bit. But even on that skin, we inhabit such a small piece of that skin of the apple, and the rest of it is covered in water. But then so much of the water goes deeper than the skin, and that's the earth. So if you then have multiple species under there, what an amazing place to hide. Or did they, and oh God, this goes deep though, the whole idea of, did they then create the planet the way it is? You know, was it a rocky planet? Did they put the water there, or was the water here already? Or then that's the whole God thing comes into play, doesn't it? Does something create us in 7 days? Is a bit nonsense, but you know, that whole idea. So I don't know if they would instill it, but it certainly seems like the most logical place to be, rather than hide in the clouds, hide out in the jungle, you know, or the desert. You would hide under the water. So I can certainly go for that. Do you buy the idea that there are beings inhabiting the planet that live underwater, or do you think it's like a temporary base type thing? What's that like in your head?
So again, I only thought about the concept because I think that's kind of connecting dots in a cool way. I would say the Earth is probably a pretty good place to live, but I can also imagine that there would be like stations or something like that. Are you okay with mentioning other podcasts? I mean, I don't want to keep on mentioning other podcasts, but I think you've mentioned.
Please, yeah.
I think you've mentioned yourself the telepathy tapes at some point, right?
Yeah.
So I actually listened to that because I heard it mentioned. Did you listen to all of them already or not yet?
I've still not. I have listened to very small clips, so I've still to listen to it properly. I'm hoping to have, is it Kay Dickens? On the podcast in January. But I've not. Yeah, I've not even said that yet. But yeah, hopefully that's happening. So, but not yet.
Can I give a spoiler, or would you like me not to do that?
Go for it.
Yeah. All right. So, so in this podcast, so spoiler alert for the people, it's about children with autism. That what we call autism. They seem to be all telepathic, at least the ones that don't speak. And one person in particular shared the idea that what we see as UFOs are actually beings that are not quite made of what we would call matter. And then you can go into this topic of, you know, the flip, Jeffrey Kripal, you know, the whole materialism thing. So actually my kind of background is also non-dual awareness type stuff, in which the idea is that everything is actually made of awareness. And then all those things become possible. You know, from that lens, all of this is just completely possible. These beings are not quite material as we see them, but they can appear material because we inhabit a material lens or something like that.
Yeah, I've not listened yet. I can see it's gone up to, I think, the number 4 podcast in the world, just through word of mouth. I know it's got a lot of traction in the UFO community with that kind of obvious tie-in of consciousness, telepathy. I'm excited to listen to it. I've no idea of the structure of it. I get the gist of what it is, and like I say, I've heard clips. I know people who have children who are autistic to varying different degrees. Subject close to my heart in a way, but that link to the UFO topic is very interesting. And yeah, I won't go too much further into it because I'm commenting on something I've not seen or listened to myself properly yet. The idea these beings are, or some of these beings are telepathic, seems to go back, and maybe it does make sense that if this telepathy is something we hear that is inherent in humanity, it's an untapped potential that most of us don't have access to, at least yet, or we don't know how to access it properly. That something that things like autism may naturally not have that lock on it, or it unlocks it, whatever that may be. People who have had near-death experiences potentially tap into something like that. It would make sense that if it's an evolutionary step, other beings who are further down the line than us, or perhaps are us from the future, if you want to go there, would have access to that. So yeah, I'm all in on the telepathy aspect of this. It does start to go down some weird paths, so, and I try and keep the conversation UFO centric, but I definitely think that's a sidestep worth taking because it's not too far away from the overall UFO chat, which is fair.
Yeah, and what I like also is that, fair enough, it's a UFO podcast, and you see also the topic tends to go to consciousness, like what is it about consciousness? But I think that's just a really good explanatory model, especially the non-dual awareness type stuff to make sense of this phenomenon. And the telepathy is kind of, I guess it's an access point to that perspective or something like that.
Yeah. Do you know what? I'll throw that out to the listeners, though, the idea that there's a subconscious control of humanity or us as a species to not go near the water or have this fear of the ocean, whatever that may be. And that would be a great control mechanism for another species to have over us to keep us away from wherever they are. So I'd like to hear people's thoughts on that, and I can share those on a future call-in. Hans, before we finish up, I'd love to get a couple of thoughts from you, as short or as long as you like, within reason, on maybe some highlights or lowlights of 2024, how the year has been from a UFO point of view, and maybe any hopes for 2025.
Yeah. So I'm just going to say I really liked, actually 2 days ago, I watched James Fox's documentary. I loved it. I know that there has been a slightly mixed perception, but I think it's completely awesome. I really loved it. So for me, just as kind of an overview with a lot of new things in it, I really liked that. So high point. And yeah, what do I look forward to? I mean, obviously, like complete disclosure, blah, 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 but like realistically, it would be really cool if, the last congressional hearings were a little bit disappointing. If there would be some kind of follow-up with a little bit more teeth, that would be pretty cool.
Do you know, I think you've summed up the UFO community, our topic, really well, because you're right. There's so many folks who have had mixed reactions to those hearings and the James Fox documentary, completely opposite to you, that haven't liked the documentary or were disappointed by it. So many folks have loved it or liked it, and there's just such a spectrum. Same with those hearings. I know folks who thought they were incredible. Other folks thought they were a waste of time. And then everything in the middle as well. So it just, again, if you're listening to this and think sometimes you're the only person that thinks what you think, trust me, there are other folks out there who feel the same as you. So Hans, thank you so much for calling. It's been wonderful having you joining us all the way from Utrecht. I hope the weather is all right out there over Christmas, the holidays, and you have a nice new year as well.
Thanks a lot, man. And all the best to you and everybody listening.
Oh, one more question, Hans. And you've got to answer with one word.
Okay.
With the recent news, are they drones, i.e. human tech, or UAP, non-human tech?
I will say 3 words. Perhaps a mix.
Oh, okay, I'll let you away with that. Maybe I have to add in a third option then. Thanks, Hans. Cheers, mate.
Thanks.
That is all for this episode. Thank you very much for tuning in. Don't forget to leave the podcast a review on your chosen platform. Apple and Spotify do make a huge difference to the algorithm. If you're checking the show out on YouTube, please don't forget to like and leave a comment on here as well. Any sharing you do is very much appreciated on any social media platform. And finally, you can listen to shows ad-free and sponsor-free in their glorious full versions by subscribing for less than the price of a coffee on Apple, Spotify, just search That UFO Podcast Premium. YouTube, you can sign up and be a member, or you can do that through Patreon.com. Thank you very much for listening, folks.
wasn't a tic-tac and not quite a saucer, more like a hubcap designed by Chaucer, a little baroque and quite steampunk, like Alice was playing bass for the Parliament of Funk. The little fucker hovered right outside of my window, and when I shoved out the screen, he made it an issue.